Hello and welcome back to Seeing Things Differently. My name's Alicia and today we're going to be talking about the emotional impact of finding out your loved one has a dementia diagnosis. So it's been a while since I last made a video, and that's because I've had a lot going on lately. Unfortunately, my dad was taken into hospital a few weeks ago, and it was for a medical reason not related to his dementia, but even so, it brought back some really uncomfortable feelings for me. Due to COVID, we weren't allowed to visit him in the hospital, so we couldn't be there to hold his hand or offer any comfort. Naturally, I started to worry and felt like I didn't know how to help. I was trying to manage my emotions while also trying to think about how Dad might be feeling. After sitting with my feelings for a while, I started to realise that they reminded me of how I felt when Dad was first diagnosed. And so I thought maybe by sharing my experience of finding out that Dad had dementia, I can help others who have just received this news as well. So when I was 14, my parents came home one afternoon and sat me and my brother down for a chat. We'd noticed Dad wasn't quite himself lately, but he was still working and still enjoying his hobbies, so we didn't really think it was a problem. Mum explained that they'd been to the hospital to see if there was anything going on, and the doctor had sent Dad for some tests. The results then came back and showed that Dad had a type of atypical dementia called posterior cortical atrophy. Mum and Dad explained that we didn't need to worry, but might just need to be more patient with Dad and be prepared to help him a bit more with day-to-day tasks. My immediate reaction to this was confusion and concern, and I remember even though they told us not to worry, I was incredibly worried and also really scared of what was going to happen. I didn't know what PCA was at the time, other than a form of dementia, and two of my grandparents had dementia, so I'd seen their progression and seen them deteriorate, and I did not want to see my dad go through that. For a long time I was really angry. I would cry, I felt rage, and I would profess how unfair life was for doing this to my dad, who was the kindest, most loving person I've ever known. He didn't deserve this, and I felt a huge resentment for life and whoever created it. I consider myself a spiritual person, not a religious one, although I did find myself asking all the gods I could think of why they'd done this and then begging them to change it. I wanted my dad to be healthy, and I felt lost because there wasn't a single thing I could do to fix this. I started to spend a lot of time alone, or in the park with a few of my close friends, but mainly just looking for any kind of distraction from the situation at home. I became incredibly depressed and withdrawn socially, and it actually makes my chest feel a little bit tight thinking about how lost and low I felt at that point in my life. More than anything, I felt really alone. I didn't know anyone who was in the same position as me or who would understand what I was experiencing. And I didn't know how to ask for support from family or friends, and so I just let this worry and anxiety keep building until eventually it consumed me. I felt myself getting to that point when Dad was in the hospital recently as well, but then I remembered there are lots of ways that I can manage my emotions. So I want to highlight that there's no correct way to react to finding out a loved one has dementia, or any terminal illness for that matter. You might experience all the emotions under the sun in one go. You might worry one day and then be okay the next on a continuous loop. You might shut down completely, or you might feel like you have to start finding out everything you possibly can about the illness. Some days we'll feel that we get it right, and other days we might feel like we've failed, and that's okay. Remember that everyone on a dementia journey is continuously learning and growing. So it took me a while to accept that it wasn't just Dad who was affected by the diagnosis, and in reality all of us needed support. So once I acknowledged that, things really started to improve for me. I started by expressing to my mum that I felt really depressed and worried, and asked how I could try to make myself feel better. The more I opened up to her, the easier it then got to share those same thoughts and feelings with other people, like family members or close friends. I realised that Mum was actually feeling the same, and I wasn't as alone as I had first thought with those feelings. In the case of my friends, just seeing that they listened and tried to comfort me, even though they had no experience personally of the situation, demonstrated just how much they cared. My really good friend Alex would simply ask if I wanted to go with him to get a hot chocolate and just sit in silence, and sometimes that was all I needed to feel connected. Talking to Dad also helped a lot. I realised that just because he has this diagnosis doesn't mean that he isn't still him. We became much closer, and I still reflect on our conversations about his childhood or his old pets and all the different things he would tell me, and they bring me a huge sense of comfort today. I was really lucky to have people around me that I felt comfortable talking to, but I know not everybody has that. Sometimes we might feel that it's not safe to share, even within our own family, or we might be worried about experiencing a bad reaction from the person that we're talking to. So it's really important to find somebody that you have a shared trust with, because these are going to be emotional conversations. If you don't have that option, that's okay. My next strategies might be more useful to you instead. So after some time, I started to feel quite low again, but I didn't want to share the dark thoughts and feelings I was having with my family for fear of worrying them and then adding to their stress. I knew we all had a lot on our plates, so I actually felt quite guilty for burdening Mum with my emotions. I explained to her that there were things I wanted to talk about, but with somebody who wouldn't be affected emotionally by it. So we discussed trying therapy, and I was comfortable with the idea. Mum found me a lovely therapist who I started to see on a weekly basis, and I have no shame in sharing that I'm still in therapy today. It was a slow process initially, but with time I started to open up and learn how to safely and calmly work through the diagnosis and everything that came with it. I felt like I was carrying around a backpack full of rocks, but each time I would go to therapy, I could take one of the rocks out and just leave it there, making the load that I was carrying feel lighter and lighter each time. Therapists are great, but they can be quite expensive, so if you're not able to cover the cost, you can access free psychological support and therapy through the NHS here in the UK. You can ask your GP to refer you for counselling, or you can refer yourself through the Improving Access to Psychological Therapies service, which I've linked in the description below. For other countries, have a look at your local charities. They might offer you support, or again, ask your doctor. The last thing that I found really beneficial in processing the diagnosis was education. Learning as much as I could about PCA made it seem a lot less scary and made me feel more prepared to support Dad. Of course, not everyone will want to hear lots of information about the disease and its progression to begin with, because that can be quite overwhelming and maybe upsetting. But in the long term, it's definitely the best thing that I did for myself. I started by reading articles online and information from Facebook groups, and then I studied psychology at university, which gave me a chance to learn more about PCA. I was able to do my own research, and in my final year I actually got to work with other people who had the same diagnosis as my dad. And today I work for a wonderful organisation where I get to keep researching PCA and supporting those affected by a rare dementia diagnosis. It's incredibly cathartic for me to use my experience to help others, and I feel like something good has finally grown out of this really difficult situation. I highly recommend popping your loved one's illness into Google and just having a read through any of the articles that come up. Maybe join some forums or groups where you can connect with others in a similar situation. And if you are affected by rare dementia, so any of the following, then I would advise that you sign up to Rare Dementia Support. I've linked the website in the description below, and we have resources for the aforementioned types of dementia. You can also access one-to-one support, where you can ask the wonderful direct support team, including myself, questions about your loved one's illness and for strategies to help them live well. If you're under 18, you won't be able to sign up as a member, but you can still see all of our super informative webinars on the RDS YouTube channel, which is linked below also. Before I round off this video, I wanted to add that dealing with emotions that come from finding out a loved one is unwell is always a process. As they did for me when Dad was in hospital, those unpleasant emotions can always come back, even when you think you've buried them and completely moved on. So don't beat yourself up if that happens. As I said, there's no right way to experience this journey. All that matters is that you acknowledge those feelings and do your best to support yourself. Try to build yourself a toolkit of strategies and things that calm you down and ground you, and just know that you are not alone on this journey. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of Finding Out Your Loved One Has a Dementia Diagnosis, where we explored the emotional impact of that news. Please remember to like this video and leave a comment if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to Seeing Things Differently to stay updated when new videos come out. And lastly, and most importantly, please share this video with anyone that you think might benefit from it. Share it on your Facebook, Twitter, or wherever you network and socialise, because you never know who might see it and really need this support. See you all next time for part 2, where we'll be discussing the physical impact of a diagnosis and exploring how we might need to adapt our home and daily routines to support our loved one.